Good morning, senior threes. It's such a long time when we have not met, and we meet today. I know you have been having lessons in English, and today we continue with the lessons, but particularly we shall have to look at functional writing. And I know that you are aware functional writing is paper 1 of English language. With the functional writing, we are going to look at the aspect called formal speeches. So we are going to see how we are supposed to deliver a speech. We shall begin by first understanding what our title here means. We have two words there. We have formal and we have speech. For us to understand this, we should know what does the word formal mean and what does the word speech mean here. I'll begin with the word formal. When you look at formal, go back to what we look at in class. What do we mean by formal? You know, sometimes we look at words and we have a feeling we know what they mean, but we fail to express ourselves by defining them. The word formal is an adjective. This being a holiday, we mostly remind ourselves of what these terms actually mean. And saying the word formal is an adjective, then what is an adjective? An adjective is a word that modifies a noun. That is why you see that here we have formal speeches, which means speech is in the category of a noun, and the word formal is an adjective that defines it. We are not looking at any type of speech, but we are looking at speeches that are formal. Then what do we mean by the word formal? Formal means very correct. This word means very correct. It means something that is official. So we are not looking at any kind of speech, but we are looking at speeches that are official or important. We can as well define the word formal to mean something done in an agreed manner. Something done in an agreed manner. I think this second definition helps or guides us very well. Agreed manner. If a speech is formal, that means there's a certain kind of trend that we have to follow for us to say it is a formal speech. We have steps to follow. We have certain things we have to do so that it comes out as a formal speech. Those steps we do not create on our own. They are set and they are known. So once we follow them, that means the speech we are making here is actually formal. So if we are saying formal means very correct or formal means official, I think you can relate this word formal to what we have looked at before. When we look at formal letters, we are aware the opposite of formal is informal. When you talk about a formal letter, we usually tell you a formal letter is an official letter. And I think it relates very well here to what we are looking at today. We are looking at a formal speech, and we are saying that a formal speech is official. It is important. It follows certain trends that have been agreed upon. Now, having defined the word formal, then we go and look at what is the meaning of the word speech. Like I said at the start, here we have two words. We have formal and then we have speech. How do we define a speech? A speech is a formal talk. This is a formal talk that is delivered to a specific audience. Formal talk delivered to a specific audience delivered delivered for a specific purpose, and on delivered on a specific purpose, and delivered it is delivered for a purpose, it is delivered to a specific audience, and it is delivered for an intention. Now, when we look at a talk, we are saying a speech is a talk, but we deliver it because there are certain things we want to communicate. That is why we are emphasizing the word specific here. When you look at our definition here, when we deliver, it is for a purpose. I want you to flash back to what happens when we are here in school. We have what we call straight talk. That is a talk. They refer to it as a talk, straight talk. Now, when they give you this talk, when we are here in school, there's an intention as to why they want to give you that particular talk. Actually, this talk has to be on a specific topic. Before they take you to the main hall and the boys are in the mosque and they have to listen to the straight talk, they must have come up with a topic to handle for that particular day. And when they handle the topic for that particular day, they know why. There's an intention. There's a purpose why they think they have to talk to you about that particular topic. And the topics that are chosen are so relevant to the audience. We are dealing with teenagers, we are dealing with students. So when they are making choice of the topic, they bear in mind the kind of audience that they have to address. Now you realize, as I talk about formal speeches, I have particular words that I keep on using. These words include a talk. These words include an address. These words, I am talking of a speech. And sometimes people talk of a sermon. When you look at the four words, these words are synonyms. They almost mean the same. When we define a speech, we say a speech is a talk given to an audience. Then when we define an address, we say an address is a speech. An address is a speech that can be given to an audience. Now, we say a speech is a talk, but an address is a speech. You realize that these words almost mean the same. But how do we differentiate them, and when do we use one and not the other? Why do we say straight talk and then we don't say straight speech? Yet we have said communication to the audience for a particular purpose, to a particular audience on a particular topic. Even a talk has that. What makes one a talk? What makes one an address? What makes one a sermon? And what makes one a speech? Now, look at the definitions we are having here. We say a speech is a formal talk. We have already defined the speech. Then we have also defined an address. An address is a formal speech given to an audience. Take an example. Recently, we have listened to we have had a presidential address where the president was talking about security. Previously, we would hear the president talking about COVID when we had the lockdown, opened for people to begin moving, and then they call it a presidential address. Why don't they call it a presidential speech? The difference between a speech and an address is that an address is always public. An address is always public. A speech can either be private or public. So if we are dealing with something that is not for the public, then we cannot term it as an address. In that case, it becomes a speech. But if we are dealing with something that has to go to the public and everybody has to know it, then we classify it as an address. So the difference between a speech and an address is that a speech can be given on both private and public occasions. An address is only given on public occasions. I hope there we have come to understand what the two terms mean. Then what do we mean by a talk? We have talked about the straight talk. Why do we term it as a talk? Sometimes we call you after class, and then the dean, the doors, the academic department comes up with a talk, and they talk to you about what you are expected to do and how to go about with the performance and etc. In that case, what we give is not a speech. In that case, what we give is called a talk. We organize a talk maybe to the senior threes. Then how do we define a talk? A talk is a fairly informal session in which somebody tells a group of people about a subject. Now we are saying it is fairly informal session, fairly informal session in which somebody talks to a group about a particular subject. Now the group is the senior threes. The subject is academics, performance. And then we call you and address you. Fairly informal. There are no particular ways that we are stuck to that we have to follow. Sometimes we come up with a design of our own. There is no design that has been put in place to be followed particularly. That is why we say fairly informal session. So I think when you look at this, we are seeing the difference between a talk, an address, and a speech. Then we come to a sermon. We usually have sermons in church. A sermon is a talk on moral or religious subjects. This is a talk on moral or religious subjects given by religious leaders. When you go to church, the reverends, the priests give sermons. I think even when you go to the mosque, the sheikh gives a sermon depending on the subject that they want to handle. I think when you look at the four, there's a very big demarcation drawn when it comes to the sermon. It is very easy for us to tell what a sermon is because it basically centers on particular themes. It has to address the moral aspect and the religious aspect. That is the area on which the sermon is majorly tied. And this sermon is not given by anybody. It is mainly given by religious leaders. But the confusion maybe would come when we look at a talk, an address, and a speech. And I hope today we have cleared the air and we have seen how we begin terming the sessions that we are having as a talk, as an address, or as a speech. I would be very happy if we get into the speeches that we are supposed to look at, having understood the topic that we are dealing with. Now, I've been talking of a speech. Sometimes people make mistakes in English. We always say we make a speech, or we deliver a speech, or we give a speech. Remember, our speech is supposed to be oral. We are supposed to say it out. But why do we study speech today? Today, as we learn what to say when we go into the world out there, we also have another aspect. where we have to sit exams, and this time we do not have to utter out our speech, but this time we have to write down our speech. When we get into the actual speeches, we shall see what is required of us when it comes to writing the speech. There's a difference between writing a speech and delivering a speech. When you begin talking, then you are delivering a speech, or you are giving a speech, or somebody is supposed to make a speech. For example, somebody can say, I have to give a speech on human rights. That means that goes back to what we have been talking about. We give, or we deliver, or we make a speech. When we write it down, that means we are making it. We are making a speech. So we go back and then we look at speeches, the formal speeches. There are so many categories of speeches that we have to look at. And under those categories, we shall come down to the speeches that we have heard of or we see in our day-to-day life. So let us look at the formal speeches. The formal speeches that we are talking about do include what we term as welcome speeches. These ones you can also call them introductory speeches. I'll give you an example. You remember when we had just returned from COVID, the first time it hit us, the first wave, and then we are given chance to return to school. We returned to school having attained a new headmaster and a new deputy headmistress. Remember very well that for every class that reported here in school, the new headmaster and the headmistress had to address the students. Now remember, they would introduce themselves. Whatever they gave us was a welcome speech. And they talked about themselves. They went ahead to tell us the schools they were coming from. They went ahead to tell us their experiences. So we got information to know about who they were as individuals. That is what we term as a welcome speech. Besides the welcome speech, we also have speeches that are termed as informative speeches. When you look at the word informative, I think we understand it very well because it comes from the word inform. We shall get to these speeches and get into the depth of them and even see the examples of the different speeches that do fall into the categories that we are talking about. We also have speeches that are persuasive. These ones you understand very well. You have interacted with these speakers on many occasions. Then we have entertaining speeches. So when we talk of speeches, we can talk of those four categories: welcome or introductory speeches. We also have informative speeches. We also have what we term as persuasive speeches, and then the entertaining speeches. Like I say, don't get worried. We shall get into the gist of all those speeches later when we get into the examples of where these speeches can be practically seen. I want to look at the parts of a formal speech. When we talk about formal speech, what should one expect to see and then qualify the speech to be formal? When we talk of the parts of a formal speech, you are organizing yourself to write a speech or to give a speech. Even when you are supposed to utter it out, to deliver it, you organize yourself so that when you get there, you move on smoothly and you do not battle with ideas. Now, parts of a formal speech. Before we get into the parts of a formal speech, we should know that when we are going to give a speech, one of the things that we do is that we have to organize material and then we make an outline of what we are going to talk about. But a good speech should begin with what we call the introduction. The introduction. So when you're writing the speech, if we are going to qualify your speech as a good one, then it should have what we call an introduction. The introduction, we are saying, should be forceful. It should be interesting, because this is the start. Why do we want it interesting? Because we want to capture the attention of the audience. If we begin with a boring speech, then people will not listen to us. You realize that a good introduction is an excellent confidence booster. So we are saying if it is good, then it will also help to boost your confidence. You realize that the people you are talking to are actually giving you their ears. You have actually captured their attention, and it will give you the morale to move on and on. The introduction sets the tone and should be appropriate. You should ensure that the introduction is appropriate, and it helps to set the tone of the speech. You know, God created us differently. Some people are soft speakers, some people are loud speakers, some people speak with force, and that is how they capture the attention of the audience. So sometimes soft spoken people that are not loud enough fail to capture the attention of the audience. We need to ensure that we are very smart as we begin the speech so that people can listen to us, because the intention behind is to deliver a message. The intention behind is to make sure people understand you. Since these speeches have aims like we are yet to see, the informative speech is meant to educate. You will not attain your aim of educating people if the introduction is so poor and you have not managed to capture them in order to listen to you and get the message that you have to deliver. That is why sometimes when we are communicating, we realize people are simply talking. Maybe they are not picking what you're talking about. They are not getting interested in what you're talking about. You have to employ certain techniques to ensure that you get them interested. So the start of the speech is very important. The second part of the speech is what we term as the body. Now, when we go into examination, as we look at speech for the purpose of examinations, you realize that this is a very important area, the body. That is the gist of the matter. We shall look at speeches and then we see what is it that comes as an introduction. What is it that takes us to the body? This is where we lay out our main points. We present the ideas, what we want to address. We begin persuading, or we inform the audience the facts and information about the topic that we are dealing with. You should ensure that this body is chronological. What do I mean by chronological? It's a little big when you look at the term chronology. We get the word chronological from the word chronology. What do we mean chronological? Step by step. And this speech, as it takes us step by step, it should build towards the climax. Ensure that you're building the speech towards the climax, but taking that step by step. When you talk about chronology, I would like to give you an example of what would best explain what we mean by chronology. I always use an example of a baby. Today, when somebody delivers a baby, the baby is discharged from hospital, taken home, and then people begin watching the baby. The baby will go through certain steps. The baby will begin by first. The very first thing the baby will do, it will sit. Usually babies begin sitting when they are 4 months old. And then they will ask you, how is the baby? And then you say, the baby has started sitting. Is this, but it's not yet firm. We usually put her in the basin, and then we put some clothes around the baby in order to get firm. Finally, the baby will get firm and it will sit. The next step will not be walking. The next step that the baby will take is crawling. And after the crawling, the baby will stand. When the baby stands, then it eventually gets the guts of moving. The baby will move. And finally, we shall have the baby begin to talk. So you realize we have the sitting, we have the crawling, we have the standing, we have the walking, and then we have the talking. That is the chronological order of development as far as this baby is concerned. So when you're also giving a speech, ensure that the body of that particular speech that you're supposed to give has a chronological order. You will fail to gain chronology if you did not organize yourself. You jump on this idea, you jump on the other. Sometimes ideas are so related in that if I begin with a particular idea, it is this idea that will drive me into another one. That progression makes things very clear, such that if I begin with this one that comes last, and then I go to what would have come first, somebody might fail to understand what I am communicating. Yet the main intention of my communication is to ensure that people understand me, that people get to know what I am talking about. So the chronology is very important. Ensure that the body of the speech is organized in a chronological order. Number 3, the last part of the speech is the conclusion. The speech should have a conclusion. Why did I say the gist of this particular aspect of functional writing is here? Because when we talk of introduction, people know what an introduction is. When you go to geography, when you go to history, and you have to write your essays, they always emphasize, begin with an introduction. Give the essay a conclusion. This is the same thing that will happen here. But the way we do it is what varies. But we term it in the same way. So if the gist of the matter is here, the actual speech is here, because the facts are here. The ideas that you want to deliver to your audience are in what we have termed as the body. Now, when I talk about the conclusion, some of us have certain ways of expressing ourselves. When you talk about a conclusion, the conclusion does not mean that you have to alert people that you are concluding. No, you have to use particular signals. The signals that will alert somebody that you see this person is coming to the end of that speech, but not specifically using expressions that will directly tell somebody that I'm concluding. I think you have had people when they give talks, they give speeches, when they communicate to you, they want to end by saying, in conclusion, as I am ending my speech, for a very good writer, that does not work. We do not make things very obvious. When you talk about the speeches, because we communicate in different ways, we shall have somebody classified as a good speaker vis-a-vis the other. These are the things that will classify you. Now, I want us to look at a conclusion, and then we see the beauty in that conclusion. How does somebody conclude without necessarily using the statements that I've talked about in conclusion to end my speech? Some people usually use this phrase. With those few words, somebody talks for 2 hours, and at the end of the day ends by saying, with those few words, surely, after you speaking for 2 hours, are they really very few words you have really talked? So it is just a habit where people simply borrow, they want to do what everybody has done before. But for a good writer and a good speaker, this conclusion, we should not necessarily have that. I think you are seeing a particular paragraph there with you. Look at that paragraph. Somebody was writing a piece and this about freedom. And as somebody talks in his conclusion, he ends with those words and says, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every helmet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. That conclusion has great beauty. And indeed, one of the things that will alert you that this speaker is coming to the end of the speech is the fact that the tone will be varied. When I was reading the paragraph, you realize that at a certain point I would go high and come down, go high and come down. That is what we mean by variation of tone. So when you're speaking and you're coming to the end, one thing this will help you is that it will also do you a very good service in capturing the attention of your audience because you're varying your voice. It will make the speech interesting, but it is also marking that you are coming to the end of what you have been talking about. And you realize that that particular paragraph that we have there has nothing to do with concluding before I end my speech, which are very obvious. We are going to write exams and they are looking at expression. I think we are aware that when it comes to this paper, they look at how best somebody can communicate. That means everybody can communicate, but some people communicate in a better way as compared to the others. That is why one walks away with a good mark and another one fails to attain the mark that person has produced because what you're merely presenting is what we see in our day-to-day life. What you're presenting is very obvious. What you're presenting, every Tom, Dick, and Harry can actually do that. So this particular ending calls on the attention, calls on the people. You know, when somebody says these words, they pull you from your seat and they engage you in their speech. And then you begin feeling part and parcel of the speech that they are making. That is why sometimes some people speak, and then after their speech, you see people standing, they give an ovation, and they will clap, having appreciated the way of communication, even the message itself. So it is important that we have good message, and the way we package our message also matters to make us very good speakers. So that was an illustration on how we can run away from using in conclusion to end my speech, and then we see. I would like to take you back to the campaigns that we have here in school. In most cases, when I attend the Gino campaigns, I feel like shedding tears because students do not know how to communicate to fellow students. All they do is to come make noise, throw sweets, dance. The students are saying, sample, sample. You don't even see what the person is talking about. Even the conclusion itself, people fail to capture the attention of the audience because of the way that they talk. But I would imagine if somebody was campaigning and somebody stands and towards the end and say, it is today or never that you vote Musoke Ibrahim. It is Musoke Ibrahim, the only man that can take you miles ahead, that can take Shibuli Secondary School mile ahead. It is today. And vote none other than Musoke. I wish you the best. Everybody will clap. Everybody will listen. But somebody comes and they are too shy and they are uttering phrases we cannot hear and they don't even have vigor in the way that they speak and they have nothing to communicate. So I think at the end of it all, when we are done with how we are supposed to make a speech, people will learn, and I have a feeling we shall have what we can term as better campaigns. Now, I've been talking about methods of arousing attention. If you're a good speaker, then you have to ensure that you capture the attention of the audience. How do you capture the attention of the audience? What do you have to do if you were aiming at capturing the attention of the audience? These are some of the things that we have to ensure that we do as we deliver our speech. Number one, relate with the audience. Don't make yourself an island. You have come to talk to these people. Ensure that you relate with the audience. What is going to make you relate with the audience? It is the topic. The topic that you zero on should be very favorable to the audience. They should be in position to understand. It should be to their interest. You know, people always enjoy listening to things that affect them, things that they are used to. That is the technique that these pastors in these churches use, these churches for the balloon. When they stand up to give their sermons, then they will begin. I can see a man. I can see a man. Your wife has gone away. You're having problems. Your dreams is to build a house and to buy a car. This is the time. God has chosen you. You came here today. And everybody in church, there are so many people with such dreams. And they will tend to think that the pastor is talking about them. So they'll take interest in what he's saying. They'll pay more attention to see how they can attain these dreams of theirs. The pastor has rotated on the topic that is of great interest to these people. So is relating with the people because of the choice of topic. You realize that in most cases, even when they are preaching, they zero to such people, to such topics. They rarely open the Bible and teach people about the Word of God, but they will talk about things that people want to hear. The young girls that go to these churches, their intention is to get married. The people who have gone to church, many of them are looking for jobs. They will rotate around that. They want to fight poverty, and they think that all this can be attained with the help of God. So these are areas that they will always address. So even us, when we are giving a speech, we should ensure that we address areas of people's interest. And when we address areas of people's interest, then that means we are relating with them very well. The other thing we should also do when we are giving this, we should not simply talk without stating the topic. I have come to give you a speech, but what am I going to talk about? People should know the area that you have come to handle. You don't only come to give a speech and you begin talking, and out of the blue, it is up to them to begin figuring out what you are trying to address here. No, that would be wrong. In your speech, you should be in position to address the topic that you have come to present to the people, and go ahead to stress its importance as well to the audience that you are communicating to. The other thing you should do, which I've been repeatedly talking about, is to ensure that you arouse the curiosity of your audience. Arouse the curiosity of your audience. We have already said that when you do this, what are you doing? You are piquing their interest. You are also getting them very attentive. It is very important. This is a very important aspect. when we come to making a speech. We are going to look at a particular paragraph that enables us arouse curiosity of the audience as we move on. The other thing we should do when we are addressing people is to ensure that we startle our audience. Startle them. Sometimes people make communication phrases, statements that are quite intriguing. You startle them with intriguing statements. The other thing that can startle them is ensuring that they are in suspense. Ensure that they are in suspense in order to get them curious. So I would like us to look at a particular paragraph that arouses the curiosity of the audience by, one, creating the suspense. Sebuyondo here is asking, teacher, are there informal speeches? We have talked about formal speeches. We would say a speech is informal if it does not actually bring out the things that we are talking about. So at the end of the day, when we see the package of what makes a formal speech, if you realize that majority of the things we are talking about are not within the speech you are giving, then it does not qualify to be formal. As we get to the actual speech, you will look at what makes a speech formal. At the end of it, we shall see samples of speeches as we go to examples of speeches, and we see certain things that actually bring out the formality, such that if the formality is not there, then it does not qualify to be called a formal speech. In that case, maybe you would say it is informal because it does not go by the set rules. Remember the definition we gave Sebiondo? We said that it is an agreed manner. Things that are done in an agreed manner. So if it is not that, then we would qualify it to be quite informal. We do not talk of informal speech, but that is what makes the speech you are delivering or the speech you are writing appear informal, because those elements are nowhere to be seen. Let us look at the silent killer. You have the silent killer with you. I am talking about arousing curiosity. When you talk about arousing curiosity, I talked about the issue of suspense. Look at the piece that you have with you there. It says, it is the most chronic disease in Uganda. Controllable but incurable. Controllable but incurable. It is a symptomless disease. People live with it for years until it kills them. Some 15 million Ugandans have this disease, and 6 million people will sell off their property and die of it before the year ends. Sad news is that 5% of the students in this school are victims of the disease. What am I talking about? Not malaria, not AIDS, not high blood pressure. I am talking about poverty. Now look at that opening. Look at that kind of communication. I said, how do you hold the writer's curiosity? How do we capture their attention? One, employing suspense. When you begin reading the paragraph and they talk about the chronic disease in Uganda, then you begin to think about all the diseases. Is it asthma? Is it diabetes? Which disease? That is where your mind will run. And then somebody says, controllable but incurable. Then you go to all those diseases that are incurable, thinking that that is what the speaker would wish to address. It says, it is symptomless. These days they say, some people who have COVID are asymptomatic. They will not have any symptom, but they will infect you with the COVID. And you say it is symptomless. Are they talking about these people? They say people live with it for years. No, COVID, you don't live with it for years. It takes you in a snap. It must be these other diseases, cancer, etc. Then there's some 15 million. You say, oh my God, 6 million people will sell off their property and die of it before the year ends. You say, oh my God, I pray that I'm not one of the 6 million that they are talking about. Then they said, sad news is that 5% of the students in this school are victims. If I was communicating to you and then I say 5% of the students in the school are victims, then you say, which disease is banana? I think the students here have what? AIDS. Banana, we are dead. Me, I'm not getting any closer to students. But then the speaker surprises you and says, what am I talking about? People who study literature, that question there that is posed is what we term as a rhetoric question. That is a very powerful tool when we are delivering speeches. Some people use those rhetorics because they trigger the mind, they capture attention. Then somebody says, what am I talking about? You say, Otio. For us, we are here debating. We don't know what you're talking about. We are thinking of this, we are thinking of that. Is when you'll keep quiet and listen and say, let me listen and hear exactly the disease that this person is talking about. Says, what am I talking about? Then he says, not malaria. Say, okay, malaria is off. Not AIDS. Say, hey, it is not AIDS. We are saved. And then say, not high blood pressure. So if you are seated in a group and everybody is guessing, now people begin getting off. It is not that one that you are talking about. Then finally the speaker says, I am talking about poverty. The person has addressed the issues stylistically. When you look at poverty, he has addressed poverty as a disease and calls it chronic. And indeed, when he unveils what he wants to talk about, that is poverty, and you reflect on the statements that have been made, it is chronic. Yes, poverty gets everybody. It says affects 5% of the students. Yes, some people at times they are very rich, then all of a sudden they become poor. There are certain things that happen in life and they take away all the money that somebody has, and then you get into the state of poverty. Everybody can become poor. So when he says it will take millions, it has already taken so many millions, it is soon taking millions, and by the end of the year it will be up to this, and victims are here in school with us. Indeed, you agree. There are people who have suffered poverty everywhere in this world. So you realize that this speaker here is so smart as far as startling the audience is concerned, as far as arousing the curiosity of the audience is concerned. And we have talked about one of the tools that helps drives the speaker here, that is the utilization or employment of suspense. So you realize that this is a style in which we can communicate. If you are in a hall seated somewhere and somebody is communicating, and maybe this is the way that they begin, this would serve as a very good introduction. I've been talking about introductions before. Look at the parts of the speech. We talked about the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Imagine if somebody was to give a speech on poverty and opens the speech with such statements. I think that would have been good enough to ensure that this speaker has the attention of the audience, because the introduction comes out very interesting, intriguing, and capturing one's attention. Now, having seen how we could arouse attention of the audience, let us also look at elements of a good speech. What should a good speech have? Number one, a good speech. I think some of you know now you're seeing the elements here. They will help you categorize the speeches that you have heard of and place them where they actually belong. What should a good speech have? Number one, a good speech should use what we term as formal language. Somebody might call you in the main hall and is giving you a speech and then begins communicating in a language that is not formal. Does it really qualify to be termed as a speech? Or it is an informal gathering where somebody wants to communicate? Now, you use formal language, which means here we have to avoid slangs. The moment you use the slangs, you're ruining. The moment you use the jargons, you're ruining the speech. The moment you use interjections, you are ruining the speech. The moment you use stock phrases, because here you don't want to speak English in most cases when people are communicating, they use stock phrases, and they will say, when they are talking to you, it is like, teacher, you know, that is what we mean by stock phrases. A good speech should not have that. A good speech should not have vocalized pauses. You are talking to people and you are using vocalized pauses. What are vocalized pauses? Sometimes when you're talking, you're speaking to a congregation and you're there, you have run short of ideas and words, and then you begin, you have already ruined the speech. So a good speech should not have such kind of informal communication. The language you use there should specifically be formal. Somebody is asking, teacher, which type of paragraphing method should we use? Block or indent? It is again, so you know. When you look at the paragraphing, we are yet to get there. We are still on the preamble of the speech. When we talk about the speech, we use paragraphs and we paragraph in the traditional way. Because we are writing using a pen, the argument for exams is that when you write with a pen, you use the traditional paragraph. We do not call it indent paragraphing, but it is called traditional paragraphing, where we move a step from the margin as we begin our paragraph. You will see when we get to the samples of the actual speeches that we are yet to see. So we have said a good speech should have formal language. 2, it should have originality. I've already talked about people who begin borrowing what other people have said, and then they do not know how to say it in the best way, and people have heard of it so many times. That is what makes the speech so boring. It should also have relevancy. Should be relevant. I have already told you, pick a topic that will help you relate very well with the audience that you are dealing with. It should also have credibility. A good speech should also have credibility. What do we mean by credibility? It should have been selected from trustworthy sources. You know, when we are giving a speech, sometimes we use quotations and etc. We refer to certain things in our speeches. Are those sources credible enough? If they are not, then they might end up ruining the speech that we are delivering to the audience. Let us go to types of speeches. Remember, we talked of the types of speeches already, and we talked about the welcome speech, which I explained. We also talked about the informative speech. Now, when we talk about the informative speech, how do you categorize these speeches? Informative speeches educate. So if somebody is delivering a speech that is aimed at educating or making one understand a particular idea or aspect, then that speech is termed as an informative speech. We also have what we term as persuasive speeches. We looked at them when we are looking at the examples of speeches. Persuasive speeches, these ones from the word persuade, these are aimed at persuading. Take an example of political campaigns. They're aimed at persuading. Take an example of the campaigns that we have in school when you are actually contesting for a particular post. You want to become a head boy, you want to become a mess prefect, you want to become chairman, students' council. Those kinds of speeches are persuasive because you have to persuade the audience to believe that you are the best candidate, to vote for you. You have to entice them. You have to make them believe they are the best amongst the people that are contesting for that particular post. So these campaigns that we have here, if we are to classify them under speeches, then we are going to term them as persuasive speeches. We also have entertainment speeches. These entertaining speeches, they are meant to amuse the audience. Somebody comes to talk to you to make you laugh, to release the tension and gas. I remember the senior fours that sat 2020 that have given us very good results when they were about to do their exam on their day for briefing. They brought somebody to help them release tension, talk to them, sang for them, sang with them certain songs that made them laugh. You know, in that talk he was communicating. That particular kind of speech was aimed at entertaining them, but with an aim of releasing their stress. We also have what we call valedictory speeches. Maybe this one I did not write when I was looking at the types. Valedictory speeches. And when we look at an example of a speech which we are going to look at today, it will actually fall in this valedictory speeches. What do we mean by a valedictory speeches? A valedictory speech is a speech that is given to bid farewell to a friend or relative. This one bids farewell. Somebody is leaving the institution and they pick on you to give a speech on that occasion. That is a valedictory speech. If somebody dies in your class and then the whole class is taken for burial and then one of you is picked on as a classmate to give a speech, that will fall in the category of valedictory speech. We also have another way in which we term these speeches as we are yet to see. So we have valedictory speeches. These ones you would also term as tributes. If we are to define what a tribute is, a tribute is a statement which helps to show one respect and admiration. You know, when we go for burial, people will begin giving those tributes to the dead. There is no single funeral that I've ever attended. And then we have one of the speakers having to say something negative about the deceased. When somebody dies, in most cases, we always say good things about them. Even when they were very bad in society, they were the worst, nobody will talk about that ugly side of them, because that is not a very good way of paying respect to the dead as our culture. So that is what we term as a tribute. We can also term them as commemorative speeches, to commemorate. From the word commemorate, this commemorative speech reminds people about a person. So when we talk about commemorative, we shall talk about commemorative, tribute, valedictory, as we are yet to see. When we go down to the speeches themselves, we shall look at what we term as the eulogy. So it is the same thing. The eulogy, commemorative, tribute, valedictory. When we look at it, when we are giving a speech, somebody has died, it will all mean the same. So those are the types of speeches. Having gone into the depth of what a speech is and the different kinds and what we should do to ensure that we deliver very good speeches, I would like to look at the eulogy as one of the examples. You know, in our course, we are supposed to know how to write 3 different categories of speeches. We have one is what we call the general speech. This is where we have the persuasive speeches, the informative and persuasive will be classified under the general. Then we also have to look at the eulogy that I've talked about. I said this can be termed as a tribute, it can be termed as a valediction, it can be termed as a commemorative speech. You know, it is so funny with students. If today I come to class and I teach the eulogy, and then in the final exam, they say, write a commemorative speech. Then you will see people looking aghast saying, this one teacher did not teach us. And then you come out of the room cursing the teachers of English. They have tested us on a speech that we did not cover simply because you are ignorant. You do not know that a eulogy is a tribute, is a commemorative speech. It is all the same. It is a valediction, or they will call it, write a valediction. So I think we have looked at all the possible terms, such that in case they twist it around, somebody is in position to know, where am I deriving this? I remember one time we never tested on minutes, writing minutes, which Mr. Sally taught you. And in class, we talk about writing minutes and functional writing. So when you never tested, it says, imagine you are the chairperson, you are the secretary to the class that has held a meeting. Then they said, write the proceedings. They simply said, write proceedings of that meeting. That is where you saw a video. Students started writing everything. When they saw proceedings of the meeting, they related the word proceedings to procedure. Now, what the examiner wanted were minutes. But because the word minutes was not there, the students did not click that they were testing them on minutes. They were only waiting for the word write minutes. But if somebody says you are the secretary of the class, and the class has held a meeting, if you are really sober, you know that if it is a meeting and I happen to be the secretary, the work of the secretary in a meeting is to write minutes. So if they say write proceedings, they are looking for minutes. Now people are looking for procedure. And then when we are marking in UNEB, you would see students writing. First, they organize the room. 2, they bring bottles of soda that they are going to take. 3, they bring writing pads. 4, they come up with an agenda. That is what they termed as proceedings. A twist in words turns you around and you fail to understand the question because you do not give it time and you do not think. Sometimes the questions require you to think and look at the scenario and look at the situation and then know what to do. If somebody had sat down and realized, the students that passed did so because they knew that the work of the secretary is to write minutes. So minutes can be termed as proceedings. So I don't want us to get into the exam and they say write a valediction and you say 2 a day. Now for us we are done. We have never seen this. The teacher did not teach us. Write a tribute because the teacher gave it the title eulogy. You did not get to know that a eulogy is a tribute. You did not get to know that a eulogy is a commemorative speech. You did not get to know that a eulogy is a what? A valediction. So we realize we have all the terms to refer to that in that if we are twisted around, we can still be on track and get to do exactly what we are supposed to do. I said we are supposed to look at 3 different categories of speech. The third one that we should also know is the vote of thanks. So when they are testing us in unit speeches, they will test these areas. Do you know how to write a vote of thanks? Why are they classified differently? Because they take different forms, they take different shapes. The way we write what I've termed as the general speech that has categories of speeches which are the formative, informative, and persuasive. So if you talk about the general speeches, then that includes your campaigns. That includes any speech that is not classified under the eulogy. We do not give it when somebody is dead, and is not classified under the vote of thanks. So if the other speeches are not under this, they do not fall under vote of thanks, they do not fall under eulogy, then that means we are looking at them under what we are terming as the general speech. And then we look at the layout, when we look at the structure, when we look at the format, those speeches will take the format of what we are terming as the general speech. Today, I want us to begin with the eulogy or the tribute. And this one, at this age, I think many of you have had a chance of attending burials and you have seen people deliver speeches. We look at a eulogy. What is a eulogy? A eulogy is a speech given at a memorial function. A speech given at a memorial function. It celebrates the life of the deceased. Memorial function, celebrating the life of the deceased. So you should know that when we talk of eulogy, do not bring in any other speech unless the speech has got to do with the death of somebody. If there is nobody who has died, then it will not be termed as a what? A eulogy. Now, this speech expresses deep feelings. It stirs sentiments. You know, sometimes when we speak about somebody who has died, the listeners will get so sentimental. Some people will even begin crying because in most cases, some parts of the eulogy are really touching. There are some people who eulogize and then they take us to the part where we get into the moment when the person was dying. The person had the chance of being around at the time when the deceased was breathing his what? Last. So when they begin narrating the experience to us, you know, he told me, I am feeling some pain here. Please raise your hand and touch here. I feel I cannot breathe. Then I brought a fan. Then we opened the windows. Then we did X, Y, Z. And he was struggling with life until when he told us, I am giving up, bye-bye to you. And I love you all. If somebody does that and they are narrating it to us as we are attending burial, you realize some people will end up crying. That is why we say the eulogy stirs sentiments. It also laments. Sometimes somebody laments about what the deceased had to go through. There are some people who die after suffering with diseases for a very long period of time, and they go through hell. So when they tell us these experiences, you realize that many of the people that have come to attend burial feel so sad. So a eulogy stirs sentiments, it laments, it consoles, and it expresses deep feelings. I want us to look at the sample of a eulogy. You have a eulogy there. But when we are writing the eulogy, before you present it, you should ensure that it has these components. What is our starting point? 1. The eulogy is supposed to begin with the title. Now we have started on the format of this particular part of speech. If we are writing the eulogy, where do we begin? We begin with the title. How do we shape the title? You know, with functional writing, if you look back on the aspects that we have studied, you realize that they are titles, but we do not write the title anyhow. There are particular shapes that the title has to take. So when you are giving the title of the eulogy, it should give us the speech giver. The title should carry the speech giver. It should carry the occasion. It should also go ahead to say something about the venue, and it should also state the date. When you studied minutes, Mr. Salim must have told you the components of the title when it comes to minute writing. How should the title be shaped? When we are taken for exams, because now we are looking at areas that are considered when it comes to the exams, the examiners will be so much interested in the title. If the title does not take this with it, then that means there are marks you are losing here. Usually when they are marking this form, they give title 3 marks. You know, this area, this particular number is out of 20, and this particular aspect, title takes 3. So if you have shaped the title poorly, that means that you are losing 3 marks. Now, when you look at the sample that you have with you, the sample gives us the title. And it says, Sheyune Rashid's eulogy. First of all, you realize that most of these titles do state the aspect that we are dealing with. When you're writing the minutes, they'll say minutes of. So it defines the aspect that you are dealing with. You are dealing with minutes writing. So when they say Sheyune Rashid's eulogy, that means we are dealing with the what? The eulogy. But we have said it should stress the speech what? Giver. So who is the speech giver? Sheyune Rashid. It is Sheyune Rashid who is eulogizing about the deceased. Remember, the other person is dead. It is not this person that is going to stand and then talk about himself. It should be somebody else to talk about that person that has died. So here the speech giver is Sheyune Rashid. And then we say Sheyune Rashid's eulogy at the deceased children's funeral service. Occasion. When we say at the deceased children's funeral service. When you read the eulogy, you realize that there were some children who had died. Now people decided to hold mass, and then somebody eulogized about these children. So what was the occasion? The occasion was they were holding a funeral service for a group of children that had died. Imagine maybe we find kids when they're going maybe home and they are murdered, 10 of them, and it is to the concern of everybody, and it is to the concern of the whole country. And then they hold mass. You realize on Heroes Day, they usually talk about people who fought in this war that brought Museveni into power. They even give people medals. They talk about the heroes and etc. So if they hold a mass for people who died in Wales because they were fighting to liberate the Ugandans, and then we are handling them generally, it is the same case that we are seeing here, where they talk about the children. Children had died. So when we talk about occasion, it is a funeral service for the what? For the children. Then when you look at the title, Sheyune Rashid's eulogy at the deceased children's funeral service at Namirembe Cathedral. Where are we? Where are we holding the service? The service is at Namirembe Cathedral. Then they say on 15th May 2020. That means that the title has embraced all the components that we are looking for when it comes to forming a title in presenting what we term as a eulogy. It has given us the speech giver, Chiune Rashid. It has given us the occasion, a funeral service of deceased children. It has given us the venue, which is Namirembe Cathedral, and it has given us the date, which is 15th May 2020. Ensure that each time you're writing a title for the eulogy, all these aspects are embraced in there. Now, the second step, as we write the speech, the eulogy itself, we go to protocol. Protocol will be the next step. What do you mean by protocol? They talk about you did not follow protocol. Protocol is not only in speech. Sometimes you have to do something and then they say, you first go to this office, you're moving as you are in need of certain materials for the students, then they say here in Chibuli this, you go to the office of the boss, the boss will sign for you, then you'll go to your head of department, the head of department will sign for you, then you take to the DOS will append a signature, then you take it to the deputy academics. The deputy academics will take it to the procurement office, and then you'll get, that is what we mean by protocol. But again, when we come to protocol in speech, protocol in speech begins from highest office to lowest. When you are presenting protocol in speech, begin from highest to lowest. If, for example, it is an address here, usually see us when we come to address you and the headmaster is in attendance. The headmaster is there seated at the front. We have the deputies seated there. We have the doors. We have the deans. Look at the hierarchy. We have headmaster on top. Below the headmaster, we have 3 deputies. Below the deputy, we have the doors and the system analyst. Below the doors, we have assistant doses and deans. Below the assistant doses and deans, we have teachers. Then below that, we have heads of departments. Below the heads of departments, we have the teachers. Then below the teachers, we have the non-teaching staff. Now, when these people are in attendance and we are talking of protocol and you are addressing, you're not going to begin and say, the non-teaching staff, you will have defined protocol. Therefore, that speech, like Samuel was asking, is losing formality. It is becoming informal because it is not following an agreed manner. So here, if it is protocol, then we are going to begin by saying, our dear headmaster, the deputy present, the director of studies, our dean, teachers, ladies and gentlemen. You realize that with all protocol, the last statement is ladies and gentlemen. Why ladies and gentlemen? When we talk about ladies and gentlemen will embrace the rest of the people that have come to attend but do not fall in the categories that you have mentioned. So if there are other people around but they do not fall in the other categories, then they are under ladies and gentlemen. So you cannot end your protocol without talking about ladies and gentlemen. But for examination purpose, this is what you should know. When it comes to protocol, when do we get marks and when do we lose marks? For examination purposes, the protocol that these people are looking for is meant to be detailed. What do I mean by detailed protocol? When you look at the sample that is there for the eulogy, it says the bereaved families. religious leaders, government officials, fellow mourners, ladies and gentlemen. That protocol is right, but it is not detailed. A student who gives such protocol will not be queried, but will not gain marks. Why? It is skeleton protocol. This is English where they are testing expression. How do you express yourself? Here, because it is eulogy, I also want you to know they begin with bereaved family, which is very right. These are the people who have lost their loved one. If it is somebody's husband, the bereaved family will include the children, the wife, the sisters and brothers to the person that has died. Now, for the eulogy, the highest in rank will always be the bereaved family. Let us assume somebody dies, and we are lucky enough, we have the president of this country attending burial. Under normal circumstances, he would have been the most highly placed person that has attended the burial. But when it comes to protocol, because it is the eulogy, the bereaved family is above the president, which means it is always a rule that if we are writing the eulogy, the very first category of people that we have to mention is none other than the bereaved family. So, I am talking about the detailed protocol. If we have people coming here, then we say our guest of honor is the Katikiro of Uganda. And then we have protocol, somebody's writing, the Katikiro of Uganda. You know, when he comes, other people will come in. The Katikiro of Uganda, the MP of this area, our dear headmaster. That is the protocol you're giving. It is skeleton protocol. It would be better if somebody says, the Katikiro of Uganda, who is none other than Oweekitiibwa Mayiga, our dear headmaster of this mighty institution, Chibuli Secondary School, Mr. Semakade Ibrahim. Look at the words that I've added on the titles and even gone ahead to mention who they are. That is what I mean by detailed protocol, other than skeleton protocol. The sample right in front of you has what we call skeleton protocol. The protocol needs to be a little detailed. If we talk about the religious leaders, if we know their names, go ahead. Of which particular church? Government officials, in which capacity? Because, you know, when you talk about government officials, it is generalizing. Are we having a minister here? Are we etc. And then we have fellow mourners, ladies and gentlemen. And you agree with me, our protocol here ends with what our requirement is, and that is ladies and gentlemen. That quickly takes us to the third step after the protocol. After you are done with the protocol, having presented it in a detailed form. Number 3, what do they want to see? You want to say greetings. And in your sample, you realize that the sample after ladies and gentlemen says good afternoon. Now, some of you sometimes wish to Isaac a lot and you want to show us that you are too religious. Instead of saying good afternoon, you stupidly say Assalamu alaikum. If you put Assalamu alaikum there for your exams, my dear, they are going to deny you marks because Assalamu alaikum is Arabic. And here we are dealing with English. So do not prove to be more religious than the highest. Some people will say, in the name of the most gracious, after ladies, in the name of the most gracious, most merciful. Spare that. Can we have greetings? Either say good morning or good afternoon. We do not expect you here to say good night. That would be very stupid of you. Number 4. Where do you go after that? We need the introduction. And this is what we call the self-introduction. Self-introduction. You cannot talk to people without introducing yourself to them. They should know who is standing right in front of them. Introduce yourself. So after, when you look at this speech, we have good afternoon, and then the speaker begins saying, I am Cheyune Rashid, a former teacher of the young souls that have departed from us today. I am Cheyune, a former teacher. That is the self-introduction. So your eulogy should go ahead to show us the self-introduction. Remember, these are components that are a must if we are to get marks for our exams and we are presenting the eulogy. And under normal circumstances, even if it is not exams, this is the best way for us to begin eulogizing if we are given the chance to give a speech when somebody has died. Now, after that, the eulogy should be in position to show relationship of the speaker and the deceased. Which capacity? Not every fool will come and stand here and begin talking to people because somebody has died. You must be standing there in a given what? Capacity. Are you a sibling? Are you the employer? In this case, are you the classmate? When you look at the piece there, the person is standing there as a former teacher of the children that we are having a funeral service for. So that means the introduction has gone ahead. The writer here ties the self-introduction to the relationship that he has with the deceased. He was in the capacity of a teacher of the young souls. So it's this afternoon we gather here to pay our best tribute of respect to these beautiful children of what? Of God. It is seen. Number 4, the eulogy should show the contribution. We'll call it the positive attributes. You know, when somebody dies, they'll say, this is a very big hit on our family. In the family, he has been head of the family. He has been financing every occasion here. He has been doing X, Y, and Z. He has been all the good things there. That is what I mean by positive attributes. Or the contribution. Which contribution have you given to society? Have you given to the people? Have you given to the family? Those are the positive things that they talk about you. He has been a very quiet person who would never wage war on anybody. He was so helpful and kind. I remember one time he did this and that. That is the contribution and positive attribute. But there is room here for you to go ahead, as somebody talks about the goodness of the deceased, to even go ahead, like I said before. If somebody is present when somebody dies, could go ahead and even narrate to us, it was 7 in the morning when he called me and told me he had lost his breath. And then you narrate to us the circumstances of his death. Number 5, the eulogy should also go ahead to give us consolation. When you look at the piece here, it does console. It gives consolation. It says, death comes to every individual. This is an amazing democracy about death. Kings die, beggars die, rich men die, poor men die, old people and young people die. Death comes to the innocent and the guilty. Death is not a period that ends the greatest sentence of life, but a comma that punctuates it to more lofty significance. An open door which leads man into eternal life. Let this daring faith be your sustaining power during these trying days. Those are words that would console you. Sometimes somebody says, I know he's dead, but now that he has been a very good person, he must have gone to heaven. Why should you have lost this person? But it is somehow consoling that this person has gone to heaven. So the eulogy should also give a consolation, and finally, the eulogy should draw a conclusion. And in the conclusion of the eulogy, we should have the RIP. We shall end by saying, may his soul rest in what? In peace. You cannot give a eulogy and then you do not talk about the soul resting in peace. Unfortunately, we are time bad. We have come to the end of the lesson. It would be more appropriate for us to go through this eulogy. But now that you have it with you, you can go ahead and check if some of the things are missing there. Then you help to pan a bit the eulogy and fix it there. If they are there, they should be good for you and guide you and see exactly what we have talked about here. I want you to go and dig out. Do I see this there? Do I see this there? Do I see the relationship? Do I see the contribution? Do I see the consolation? Do I see the conclusion? And then we see how best we can shape it. We shall look at other samples of the eulogy as we continue. I wish you the